Hello, pattern readers, and welcome to part 4 of the Great Hunt reread. I had intended this part to come out last Sunday, but life happens, my friends. So my basic plan for now is to film reread videos on Fridays and release them on Sundays. Wish me luck. In any case, make sure you are caught up on parts 1 through 3, and now let's finally get this hunt started, you sheep-gutted milk drinkers. This video may include spoilers for all Wheel of Time books. If you have not finished reading the series and do not want to be massively spoiled, stop here or proceed at your own risk. Chapter 9, Leave-Takings. Rand joins the group of men preparing to leave with Ingtar's party in the outer courtyard. Uno, Ragan, and Missima are among them, and Loyal joins, followed by Mat and Perrin. Rand immediately tries to apologize to Mat and Perrin, but they ride away from him. Loyal comments on Rand's fancy coat, and Rand apologizes to him as well, and Loyal grins, not holding anything against him because he is too pure for this world. Lan approaches, and asking to speak to Rand alone, he imparts one more lesson, which he calls Sheathing the Sword. In other words, allowing oneself to be killed in combat in order to achieve a goal at all costs. Land leaves as Siuan and Agilmar walk by, with Siuan coming to give blessings to the hunt for the horn and Agilmar attempting to convince her to stay. Rand suddenly feels unseen eyes again, and an arrow from an unseen source grazes Siuan, killing a man behind her. Agilmar is aghast and ashamed at this near miss, and Siuan is completely unfazed, refusing to be detained, giving her final blessings and departing. Rand catches up with Ingtar as they head out and learns that 2 Shienaran guards who had been on duty in the dungeon have disappeared and are probably dark friends. He is also introduced to Hurin, the party's sniffer. He can smell violence and is therefore able to track the dark friends who have stolen the horn and dagger. The party follows Hurin, heading south. Bail Doman is in Ilion during Carnival. He enters an inn called Easing the Badger and takes a seat alone, but is quickly approached by 3 Cairhienin men. They offer him an exorbitant sum to take a job in Mayenne. Doman does not trust them, having received similar too-good-to-be-true offers, all designed to get him to go east, but he pretends to accept. After, he notices they've paid him in Tarvalin marks, and learns that one of his men has been tortured and killed, as has happened 3 times before, every time he has refused a commission. He gives orders to his second, Yaren, to prepare the spray for immediate departure. Though it is night, as soon as he is on board, he orders Yaren to take them immediately to sea. And he opens the letter that he was supposed to deliver. It names him a dark friend and is signed by Galdrian, king of Cairhien. He hides it in his stash of strange belongings. Among these is a piece of Quaindiar in the shape of the ancient Aes Sedai symbol, and he's afraid that this is what his pursuers are after. He gives orders to make for Toman Head. Chapter 10, The Hunt Begins. Ingtar sets a reckless pace for the party, guided by Hurin, but when they stop to examine the trail, Uno thinks they haven't made up any time. Rand tries to talk to Mat and Perrin, but Mat will not let him, and Perrin follows Mat. Finally, they are forced to slow down and eventually stop for the night. Rand is dismayed to find that he only has fancy embroidered coats in his bag and blames Moiraine. He notices Uno giving him odd, intense looks, and Missima being openly hostile. Ingtar explains that Uno was wondering if Rand has earned his Heronmark blade, and Missima thinks he looks like an Aiel, whom he hates after fighting in the Aiel War. Rand is very unsettled by all this talk of the Aiel, remembering all of the people who have mistaken him for one and everything he's been told about his birth. The next day, they come across the spot where the Dark Friends camped, and Hurin tells them murder and worse was done there, and they've changed directions. And they continue on, and every so often come across another murdered body and a direction change, northwest, then south, back and forth each time. This pattern continues for days until they finally come to the river Aranin and a small village. Perrin thinks it smells wrong, and Huron says the Dark Friends went straight through, leaving the ferry on the other side of the river. Ingtar orders a search of the houses while the ferry is recovered and the other side scouted. The houses are empty, but they think they see a woman in a white dress in one of the windows. Or is it just a curtain? Huron says he's never smelled anything like what happened here. As they cross the river, Rand tries to reassure Matt, and Matt just sneers at his coat. Perrin recalls crossing the Taran, but says that this time will be much worse because he can smell what's on the other side. They find the two Shienaran guards flayed to death. Ingtar orders them properly buried and even says the traditional Shienaran blessing over them. The light shine on you, and the Creator shelter you. The last embrace of the Mother welcome you home. Loyal and Ingtar trade history lessons as they ride on. They come to another village, and again, Huron smells something bad, and they search the houses. This time, Rand enters one alone and has a bad trip. He gets repeating images of a family preparing to eat a meal in the room and then suddenly screaming as the door bursts open. Each time, he sees more and more flies filling the room until they cover him. Finally, he touches Saidin, and the images vanish, leaving only the leftover meal and 6 dead flies. He rushes out, and the group has found a dead Fade, killed with spikes driven through its face and limbs. They ride off as quickly as they can. Chapter 11. Glimmers of the Pattern. Ingtar calls an early halt, and they camp in a deep, round hollow. Uno is going off about seeing the same woman in a white dress in that second village, and no one believes him. Rand is deeply unsettled when Ingtar approaches him, and he asks for an explanation of what they saw. Ingtar tries to brush it off. Trollocs took the villagers for food. It happened near the Blight. He changes subject and gives Rand a bundle that Moiraine instructed him to give him at the first camp south of the Aranin, and to tell him that his life may depend on it. He now also tells Rand that he is his second in command, and if anything happens to Ingtar, the lances will follow Rand. Rand is confused and tries to deny it, but Ingtar is firm. He is confident that Rand will do his duty. Alone, Rand opens Moiraine's bundle and finds the dragon banner, just as Matt and Perrin come upon him, jaws dropping as they see it. Rand finally explains. Moiraine and the Amyrlin have named him Dragon, and he can channel. Matt goes off about how they're all in danger until Perrin tells him to shut up and asks Rand what he's still doing there. Rand admits that he stayed to try to find the dagger and to help Matt. Matt is abashed, but sticks his foot in his mouth again by asking if Rand is already mad, and he's grateful, but he'll keep his distance, and Rand isn't the same anymore, before walking away. Perrin stays a moment longer and offers some friendly advice to run, though he admits that sometimes you can't run. Alone again, Rand hesitates but decides to keep the dragon banner, and then sadly goes to make his bed near Loyal and Huron, and a half-buried odd stone in the ground. The void flickers as he finally falls asleep. Fane fingers the ruby-hilted dagger from Shadar Logoth that makes him feel whole. He turns to the 12 remaining, now disheveled dark friends and recalls killing the Fade with joy. He tells the Trollocs to kill all the villagers, eat, and then leave a gruesome pile for their followers. He turns back to the dark friends, telling them they could be next. They break and sob and try to convince him of their importance, but he ignores them. He places the unsheathed dagger on top of the chest with the horn, which he cannot open. He knows that no one will come near it after seeing what happens when he uses it. He can no longer sense Rand, who has disappeared from his senses, as he sometimes does. But he cackles with mad laughter, knowing that Rand will come to him. Sheathing the Sword, we think will be foreshadowing for Rand having to use this maneuver. And he does, actually, at the end of this book in Falma, as does Ingtar. But I think that disguises what this was really meant to be foreshadowing for. Really, it's foreshadowing for Lan using it in his one-on-one with Demandred, and the key way that he succeeds after Gawain and Galad fail. The arrow that grazes Swan, we are strongly led to think was actually intended for Rand. At the end of the book, we do find out that it was a gray man that Ingtar was ordered to let into the keep. And the gray man also explains the unseen eyes that both Rand and Liandrin feel. Some people think the unseen eyes are Fane, but I don't think so, given that Liandrin feels it too, and Rand feels it after Fane is gone and right before the arrow. But the question is, who was the gray man's intended target? I've seen a very convincing argument on the 13th Depository that Swan was the intended target in an assassination attempt that, if it had succeeded, would have put the Black Aja in much greater control in the White Tower. I think it's also more in keeping with what we know of Ashamael's orders at the Darkfriend Social. Killing Swan would have been a benefit to him. Killing Rand, though, that doesn't seem to be what he's aiming for at this time. He still wants to turn him to the shadow. It's likely the Taviran twisting of chance that led the arrow astray from its intended target. The Baal Doman interlude is intriguing, and I think he's probably right about the seal on the Dark One's prison being the reason he's being pursued. But honestly, I don't get why no one has just ransacked his boat and taken it already. We get a little bit of an info dump about the Aiel, and among that is the detail that although they view the world as Aiel and enemies, they make an exception for the Tuatha'an. We will come to learn that this has to do with their history as former followers of the Way of the Leaf and their shame in deviating from it, though at this time that is known only to their leaders. There are a lot of hints seeded throughout these chapters about Ingtar being a secret and regretful Darkfriend. He's in near constant despair when he's not desperately trying to will the horn into his hands, believing that it might be his salvation. There's his treatment of Changu and Nidao, the Shinaran guards and suspected Darkfriends. He treats their corpses as he would any Shinarans, and that after saying that he would not waste time burying Darkfriends after the first corpse that they found. His saying the blessing over them mirrors Rand saying it to him when he makes his redemptive sacrifice at the end. He grimly talks about nations failing and humankind being swept away and consumed by the shadow and things falling apart. It's very clear on reread that the only thing that Ingtar is holding on to is finding the horn and setting something right. The glimpses of a woman in a white dress who disappears is, of course, Lanfear, who we will be meeting as Selene in short order. Some people thought that Lanfear was responsible for this strange encounter Rand has with the flies, or maybe you thought it was a bubble of evil. But officially, according to Robert Jordan, it was a trap left by Padan Fain for Rand, which he escapes from by channeling. We have to, of course, talk about the relationship between Rand, Mat, and Perrin. There's so much frustration here. Rand is, at this point, trying to do the right thing, make amends, and come clean, and he actually does tell Mat and Perrin the truth. He did cause this conflict between them by not telling them the truth in the first place, and instead trying to push them away by acting a lord. But at this point, I am more sympathetic to Rand and annoyed by Mat, and to a lesser degree, Perrin. This is really Mat being stubborn by refusing to hear Rand out and acting like a child by continuing to ride away from him. Perrin is being a follower here. Yes, he's mad at Rand too. We saw that from the previous chapters, but it seems like a part of him wants to hear Rand out, but he just goes along with Mat anyway. The worst moment is when Rand tells them the truth and Mat rejects him anyway. This is a tough look for my guy Mat. To be honest, at this point on first read, I still didn't like Mat. and it's still difficult to defend him. He's not being a friend to Rand. It might help if we had his point of view, but I'm not sure because it's typically Mat's actions that speak most highly for him, not his thoughts. I guess we just have to accept that Mat needs more time and he will eventually come around and honor their friendship in his own way. You'd think, given what had happened to him with the dagger, that he might have more sympathy, but Mat is not reflective by nature, and still being in the pull of the dagger isn't going to help either. Perrin is reflective, and he does show more concern for Rand and some sympathy also in relating Rand's struggles to his own. I did like him telling Mat to shut up. But unfortunately, he doesn't go far enough in really sticking by Rand. And Rand is left alone, feeling that his closest friends are now afraid of him and that anyone else who knew the truth would probably also be afraid of him. For this combined section, I want to, instead of talking about a theme this time, just talk about the overall feeling of fear and dread and horror that Robert Jordan built so effectively in these chapters. He creates multiple mysteries here. Who shot the arrow? Why do the Dark Friends keep changing directions? Who is the woman in white? We have Perrin and Huron who can both sense the wrongness of the Dark Friends and the Shadow Spawn. Huron is always smelling something worse, something that he can't quite explain. And we have various characters who have knowledge of Shadow Spawn, dropping hints about Trollocs eating humans and playing with them for sport, and the Myrddraal who do even worse things. It's the R word, guys, even though it's not stated. And each time they stop, they find something worse. First, just dead Dark Friends, then empty villages, then dead Shienarans who have been skinned alive. Then Rand falls into this eerie trap. Then a dead Myrddraal. What could do that and how? Finally, we get a glimpse of Padan Fain, and we see that Dark Friends and Trollocs alike are terrified of him. He killed a Fade and liked it. He drops hints about being something more than he was. And he can sense Rand, though apparently not when he's in the void. Still, his connection to Rand is terrifying, as is his bond with the dagger. All I'm saying really is that these chapters are a very effective horror sequence, and I'm very curious to see how it will play out on the screen. How much of Padan Fain can we see to introduce the terror but not overplay it? And will some of the stranger elements, like the trap Rand falls into, which is never really explained in the books, will that make it in or not? There's very little humor in this section because it doesn't mix all that well with horror. But I'll give a shout out to my guy, Bail Domon, because I'm never going to not laugh at his use of my aged grandmother. You also gotta love Uno's foul mouth. This quote is easily the best of the section. You say what you bloody want to, but you watch how you flaming say it, or I'll bloody kill you myself and burn the goat-kissing hide, you sheep-gutted milk drinker. I'll also give a shout out to Loyal, who can at least always bring a smile to my face. He's just so pure and good-hearted. I especially loved his sheepish pride in once outrunning a horse. So leave me a comment, guys. Let me know which of the three ta'veren most annoyed you in this section. Do you find Uno or Bail Domon funnier? And are you hoping that we see that strange trap of Padan Fain's in the show or cut it out? Next up, I'll be covering chapters 12 through 14. In the meantime, as usual, like, subscribe, check out my other videos, and I'll see you next time when we go into the Mirror World.